Hello, thanks for clicking on the video. As promised, wanted to do a quick breakdown on the first BLF tournament for the Ozark division that I fished this previous Saturday up on Tablerock Lake. It was actually a pretty good tournament for the conditions that we had. I was in the third flight. It was boat number 55 and got launched out about 7:15 or so. And it was about 40 degrees, overcast, little to no wind. Those conditions basically persisted through the entire day. Had a little bit of sun peek out towards noon to 1 time frame. It didn't do anything to help the bite at all. What I was finding in the areas that we were fishing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, was that the fish were sitting pretty tight to the bottom. They weren't real actively feeding. My boater had live scope, and he was able to see fish follow his A-rig and stuff up out of the timber and out of the brush, but they wouldn't commit to it. He was getting a lot of short strikes. I was getting a lot of short strikes, bringing in swim baits and stuff without tails. I'll talk about my gear and stuff as we go on. The water temp was about 44 to 48 degrees, depending upon where I was at. And we started down on the lower end of the lake, main lake area, to begin the morning, and then abandoned that shortly after about 10 or so. And we ran towards the White River, ran up the White River a little bit. Um, Seems like that's where the majority of the bigger fish were being caught. Again, I was catching a lot of short fish, but nothing that would weigh. I ended up finishing an 86th out of 205 co-anglers with that one fish weighing 2 pounds and 4 ounces. So nothing to write home about, but it was a learning experience, and it gave me an opportunity to see the lake for the first time, and I enjoyed it. So workhorse for me this tournament was a swim bait. Majority of what I was throwing was smaller Kitex 2.8s, and either fishing them on a 1/8 ounce head if I was up shallow, and on a 1/4 ounce head, just standard round ball jig head if I was fishing anything that was deeper than about 10 feet or so. And that's what all the majority of the fish that I caught came on. I caught one on a Ned rig, and I'll talk about how I rigged it up because it is a little bit different. I never even flew through a crankbait. I had one tied on, but the conditions in the water and everything, the fish just didn't line up for that. And then I, of course, was flipping a jig here and there. My boater wanted to move pretty quick, so I needed to fish baits that were conducive to moving quick and being able to cover a lot of water real fast. And that's why I selected those baits for this time of year. You can't really go wrong with a swim bait. You can catch huge fish, you can catch small fish, but as a co-angler, you always need to be thinking about what baits can I generate the most bites on. It's important to be getting those bites. If you're not getting bites, you're not really sure if you're around fish. And that was particularly true for me. My boater didn't adjust the graph or anything for me so that I had a graph to fish on. I'm sure I probably could have asked, and that's one of those learning curve things. But he was really committed to his live scope, and outside of having the Lake Master map up, I really couldn't see what was on the bottom or if I had suspended fish or timber. So there was a lot of just blind casting going on to areas that looked good from where I was standing. And then again, boat positioning is always a big one. And when you're in the back of the boat, there's no control over that. So you got to fish what's in front of you. Now, besides the swim baits, and I was fishing the swim baits because of their size on just a 7'6" medium action carbon light with the fluger reel. I was fishing 8-pound line, Seagar fluorocarbon. And that seems to be doing really well. For my Ned rigs, I was throwing them on a 6'10" carbon light, medium light, and I was fishing 10-pound braid to a 6-pound Seagar fluorocarbon leader. And that handles the light Ned rigs really well. And then, of course, standard crankbait rod that I didn't utilize. And for my jerkbait, I was using the Stunner 112+1, and I was throwing that on my Icon. And it's just a 7'10" medium, fast tip spinning setup, which I actually got right here. And I just like this setup overall when I'm fishing a jerkbait, especially this time of year, because you got to fish them so slow, and it's more of a twitch rather than a real pop to them. And I feel that I get better sensitivity through that rod. maybe later in the year. I do have a 7.6 bait caster and a 6.6 bait caster and a 7-foot bait caster, depending upon which jerkbait I'm throwing that I use as well. But nothing special there. 10-pound fluoro Seagar was what was tied on, or what had that bait tied on. To talk a little bit about the Ned rig, because I did catch some spots on a Ned rig. They're all short fish, 13, 14 inches, but they were fat. They were definitely feeding up. And as you know, Ned rig is another one of those baits that just generates, a lot of bites. Big bites, little bites. It's one of those little morsels that you can put out there and kind of understand what the fish are doing or get a feel for them. Now, I don't like Ned rigs because they get hung up so much most of the time, especially around rock and timber. So I wanted to get away from that traditional head. And I just don't like fishing the weedless heads too much with the wire guards. They're great in some situations, but I'm trying some new things. And what I've come up with, or what I've found really through research and watching some other guys fish this way, is I'm running my Neds Demiki style. So you'll see that I have the weight inserted down here in the bottom, and then I'm just using a 1/0 VMC Nico hook and just hooking that weedless through the top with just a little bit of that net exposed right there. And you can tuck that up nice and clean and really do a lot to hide that point. But this bait works really well when you're coming down through tree branches and things. It will snake right between them. The snagability on this lure is very, very low. Be great to provide to somebody who's new to fishing, new to bass fishing, and you just want to have them have a good day. A little rig like this, it doesn't snag up. It's a bite-sized little morsel. They can catch 1-pounders or 10-pounders on them legitimately. This is a great way to go. Now, I will caution you that getting your nail weight into a Ned rig, a traditional Z-Man, finesse TRD is what this is, can be difficult. Those nail weights, they don't push through Elastec real well. I mean, as you guys know that fish these, right, they're durable. So getting that weight down in there can be difficult. If you're in a pinch and you want to try this technique, what I will say is you can sacrifice one of your Ned heads, run it all in there like you normally would, and then clip the hook off, clip the eye off where you tie in, and just run it that way. But I would recommend that if you're using a traditional push-in nail weight with the barbs on it, that you maybe pre-rig those, because fighting with one of those on a boat, trying to get them in, especially when your fingers are really cold, is difficult. And that's one of those lessons that I learned, is that it's a nice little rig, but I need to have some that are just pre-rigged and ready to go. So if I lose one or I change colors, I can just clip one off and tie the next one on. But overall, it was one of those tournaments that on paper is kind of deceiving. You look at the upper weights and you see guys, bringing in lots of limits and things. What you don't see unless you scroll down and really look at it is that over half the field failed to weigh a fish. Out of 410 anglers out there were over 205 that didn't bring anything to the scale. Now, whether that means that, somebody just didn't want to weigh one fish, one small fish or whatever, you never know the case. But every fish is important. You get 25 points just for bringing a fish across the scale. So I can't foresee that anybody released a keeper and just decided not to weigh, although I have experienced that with some people in other tournaments that I fished. So, when I look at my 86 place finish out of 205 guys, that's not too bad, especially when you consider the amount of total anglers that didn't catch fish. It's about 110 or so co-anglers that didn't catch one or weigh one. And I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like 120 or 125 boaters that didn't weigh any fish. So, that's pretty staggering right there. So I try not to get too into the stats. It just messes with my head and my confidence. Stats can be skewed however you look at them. I finished about where I figured I would fish. Had the small fish that I was catching, had any of those, one or two of those been long enough to weigh, it would have drastically changed my finish position. Had I had, 3 more pounds in my bag at the weigh-in, I would have been up in that top 45, possibly even cashed a check. But not in it for the money, in it for the experience and in for the joy of it. So I hope this information helps. If it does, please give me a like, give me a subscribe. Know, more content is on the way as things develop, and I will keep you up to speed on the tournament trails. The next one is going to be here on my home lake, Grand Lake of the Cherokee, for the Okie Division BFL. And that is this Saturday. So got me in the tackle room going through gear right now, deciding, kind of what I want to put together for my practice days. I'm going to try to get out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and fish up a little bit before the tournament. Just to give me some knowledge, even though I'll be in the back of the boat again, if I can provide my boater with some real-time practice information, that might make it easier on me. So we'll go with that for now, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the future. If you have any questions about anything that I'm doing, any of the baits that I'm using, I haven't got it all figured out how to link everything in the comments and stuff, but I will get there eventually. So just shoot me a message. You can either find me here on YouTube, you can find me JLB Bassin on Facebook, and also JLB Bassin on Instagram. So that's it for now. Keep fishing.